John Oldman moves efficiently, methodically, as he packs up his belongings into his truck. He doesn't have much, just a few boxes, some furniture, and an old framed painting he handles with particular care. His house, a modest rural home surrounded by open land, is nearly empty, the walls stripped of anything personal. He is preparing to leave, just as he always does. His colleagues arrive in a group, unannounced but expected. They have all worked with him at the university and, despite their different disciplines, they share a warm camaraderie. Harry, the biologist, always practical and somewhat skeptical. Edith, the art history professor and devout Christian, kind-hearted but firm in her beliefs. Dan, the anthropologist, thoughtful and deeply fascinated by human history. Sandy, the historian, intelligent and warm, harboring an unspoken love for John. Art, the archaeologist, sharp and often cynical. Linda, a young student who seems drawn to John's quiet charisma. They have come under the guise of a farewell party, but their unspoken purpose is clear. They want to know why John is leaving so abruptly, with no real explanation. John at first dodges their questions with humor and vague responses, but he knows he can't avoid them forever. As they settle into his nearly barren living room, sitting on whatever furniture remains, drinking and exchanging jokes, the conversation turns to history. Dan makes a passing reference to Magdalenian cultures, and something in John shifts. He hesitates, then, as if testing the waters, he begins to speak. He suggests a hypothetical. What if a man from the Paleolithic era had somehow survived to the present day? What if he had lived for 14,000 years, never aging, always moving on before anyone could notice? At first, his colleagues take it as an intellectual exercise, an amusing premise for a science fiction novel. They throw questions at him, arguing playfully, offering theories and counter-theories. But as John continues, the tone in the room subtly changes. He speaks not in speculation, but in experience. He answers questions too quickly, too precisely. Skepticism grows among the group. Art challenges him immediately, demanding evidence. Biology wouldn't allow such a thing, Harry insists. Human cells don't work that way. John shrugs. Maybe he is a genetic anomaly. Maybe he simply got lucky. He doesn't know. He only knows that he stopped aging at around 35, and he has been that way ever since. The questions keep coming. Art, ever the cynic, accuses John of just reciting information from textbooks. John counters that he only remembers what he personally experienced, and his memory is as flawed as any other human's. He doesn't have an omniscient view of history, just fragmented pieces, moments in time as he lived them. He tells them he was a Sumerian for 2,000 years, that he later became a Babylonian, and eventually traveled east, where he became a disciple of the Buddha. The group listens, fascinated despite their doubts. He claims to have met Van Gogh, who gifted him an original painting. He almost sailed with Columbus but, at the time, still believed the earth was flat. His memories are personal, sometimes contradictory, just like any other person's. At some point, Art, unable to accept the possibility, calls in Dr. Will Gruber, a psychiatrist. Will is older, weary, with an air of quiet authority. He listens intently but does not interrupt at first. As the conversation progresses, however, he begins probing deeper, shifting the discussion from science to psychology. Does John feel guilt? Regret? Has he suffered loneliness, knowing he will outlive everyone he cares about? John does not answer right away. Then, slowly, he admits that he has lived through more grief than anyone can imagine. He has watched everyone he ever loved grow old and die. He has buried wives, children, friends, again and again. He has never been able to hold on to anything for long. Will's skepticism sharpens into something colder. He demands proof. When John offers none, Will pulls out a gun. The room tenses, but Will eventually reveals the weapon is unloaded. He leaves the house, his emotions tightly restrained. Harry, watching Will go, mentions quietly that Will's wife died just the day before. The group is silent. John follows Will outside. He does not say much, just that he is sorry. Something in Will softens, and he follows John back inside. The conversation takes another turn, drifting toward religion. John mentions that he has never adhered to any faith. He does not claim to know if there is a God, though he does not dismiss the possibility. But when pressed, he hesitates. The room waits. Finally, reluctantly, he reveals something shocking. He says that, centuries ago, he attempted to spread the teachings of the Buddha westward, into the Roman Empire. His words were misunderstood, exaggerated, twisted. And eventually, they became the basis for the story of Jesus. The room explodes into emotion. Edith, deeply religious, bursts into tears. She calls John's claim blasphemous, refuses to listen. Will, now returned and listening, is furious. He demands that John put an end to this, to admit it is all a lie. If he does not, Will threatens to have him committed for psychiatric evaluation. John pauses. He looks around the room, at his friends, all staring at him, waiting. He sighs and, finally, relents. Yes, he says. It was a story. A hoax. There is relief from some, disappointment from others. The group disperses, each person dealing with what they have heard in their own way. Edith is reassured. Art, still furious, vows never to see John again. Harry remains open-minded but unconvinced. Dan is silent, but his expression suggests he believes. And Sandy are clearly certain John told the truth. Only Will and Sandy remain after the others leave. John speaks quietly to Sandy, mentioning names he has used over the centuries. Will, overhearing, freezes. One of those names was his father's. He turns to John, his face pale. He asks John questions, specific, deeply personal, things only his father would know. John answers them all. Will stands, his breath coming fast. The realization hits him with such force that his heart gives out. He collapses. John catches him, holding him as he dies. The ambulance comes, and Will's body is taken away. The house is silent. Sandy looks at John, realizing something. If his story is true, this is the first time in 14,000 years he has seen one of his own children die. John says nothing. He gathers the last of his things, walks out to his truck. He starts the engine. He is about to leave, just as he always does, but then he hesitates. Sandy watches him. Slowly, she walks forward. John waits. She climbs into the truck. He drives away.